Hello, everyone. Welcome to my session, Closing the Feedback Loop, Why Community and Transparency Are Critical for Innovation Programs. I'm Becky Scott, and I will be your host for this session. All right, I am sharing my presentation today. Happy to have you here with me, and we are going to get started. So, a little bit about me and why I am speaking on this session. I am head of technical community and advocacy at a company called Jump Cloud. We're a SaaS company, and I'm a board member at a couple of places, the Mac Admins Foundation and the Association of IT Professionals in RTP, which is in the Raleigh Durham area of North Carolina. My background, I work with developer and technical audiences, do outreach and innovation programs. And I've done that at companies like Verizon, Cisco, Cloudera, and now at Jump Cloud. And we're going to get started by talking about a few things. I'm going to talk about some common terms that I'm going to be using today and what they mean in this context. I'm going to talk about community and what that means in relation to this topic and why you should be thinking about it, what transparency is in this context, and why it's critically important in innovation programs, and then closing the loop and how that contributes to a successful innovation program. So, first, we're going to define feedback loop, and there are lots of definitions, but for this purpose, we're going to talk about it in context of an innovation program or basically a developer's program where you're working on software and you're doing the whole feedback process. You start with gathering feedback, then you analyze and prioritize the different pieces of feedback that you get, you take action, and then that very last step, follow up. That is closing the loop. That follow up that you do to let people know what you did with their feedback is actually a really critical piece of that whole loop. So, to close it, this very last step of following up is going to be the most critical part of making your program successful. And we're going to go into that a little more, but I wanted to define what that loop is for this discussion. Now, community. What we're talking about here is a group of people gathering due to a common interest. Sometimes people will gather in person, but a lot of this, what I'm referring to and what I do for a living, is around people gathering online due to something they have in common. Transparency. For this case, we're talking about being upfront and truthful, but as much as you can about your processes. We're not talking about, breaking the rules of your company, sharing company secrets or things like that. It's just being clear about your processes and what your company does when you are, you know, part of being a developer or your DevOps process, but sharing what you can as frequently as you can. But it's not about just placating or patronizing your users. It's about sharing with them. And as I bring up this next definition, we're going to launch a poll about innovation programs. And so when I'm speaking of an innovation program, what I'm referring to in this context is gathering feedback from users of your product, and it's in whatever way works for your business. It could be gathering feedback via conversations with customers. It could be gathering feature requests and having them submit those requests, or an ideas program where you have a place for people to give their ideas about what they'd like to see in your product. It could be around having a beta or early access program where your customers actually test what you're putting out and then give you feedback around that. So it could be any of those things. And that is what we're talking about for innovation. So, step one of this process I'm talking about is building community. And again, there are several different ways to build community. One of the first things is find out where your users hang out. And by the way, if you already have a community space, that's awesome. But if you don't, find out where they hang out already and go see them where they are. Like a lot of times that you might find a subreddit where they're hanging out, or maybe they already have a Slack instance where they're talking to each other. Go find it and hang out with them. And then start talking with them and earn their trust. And what I mean by earning their trust is give more than you get. Don't and I hate saying don't. I'd rather say like things you do rather than things you don't. But a lot of times people will go in and they immediately want something. And that doesn't work with these audiences. You want to go in and help them, give them something from your company, give them knowledge, give them help and provide something to them. That is how you will earn their trust because you're not immediately going in and trying to extract something for them and being transactional about the relationship. Then listen to what they have to say about your products. Like, really, really listen. The things they may say, hmm, they might not be comfortable. They might not be positive, but still listen to what they have to say. There are probably good reasons as to why they're saying what they're saying about your product. So put the defensiveness aside and really listen what they have to say about your products. And then ask questions. Try to understand why they feel the way they do. Learn more about what's going on and their use cases and why people are frustrated if they are, or why they're happy if they are. Dig in and learn more. This is how you start building a relationship with people. And really, community is about connections and relationships and building a rapport with people. That is how you connect and start to build these wonderful relationships. And lastly, be consistent. Do what you say you're going to do. If you say, I'll get back to you on that question, go do your research and then get back to them. And if it's taking longer than you thought it would, come back and say, I'm still working on it. I haven't forgotten you. I will come back again. Because if you don't close that loop, like I talked about earlier, then people aren't going to trust you over time. So, again, be consistent. Do what you say you'll do. Come back to people and follow up even if you don't have the answer. And now that I've talked about community, we're going to launch a second poll about community and see whether any of you that are in attendance right now actually have a community or not. Because we want to hear from you and see if you already have one. Okay, the second step is on top of building community to hear from the people who use your product, are familiar with your company. You want to add on that transparency step. Talk about what you're doing frequently. Talk about it often. Like, where's your company at in the process of building. You don't have to share your whole process, like every single step, but do more than just the quarterly roadmap. Talk about what you're thinking about doing. And I know it gets tricky when roadmaps change and features change and things like that. But it's okay to tell people that, hey, we had these things committed on in our roadmap and something changed. And so we're going to adjust it. The more you talk to people and let them know that, the better they handle it. It is so much better to give information and share some of your process instead of having a black box. Let your community have some inside scoop. That is a really great way to build on that relationship and give them updates on the community. If you have your own community site and you have a forum, that's a great way. Or if you have a Slack where you're sharing information, or you have like your own company subreddit, we have several places where we do stuff like that. Um, but find a spot where you are sharing with your community and maybe, you know, start regularly sharing information there. What that will do is it will draw others to join the community and then actually give them reason to join. And then ask for feedback on your processes or new features with that community. That's a good way to gather additional feedback. Once you've been giving to them, then it's okay to ask for feedback from them. If you just talk to people, they will be, after you've built a relationship, they will be so willing to give you information. And then the next one, combine all of this with your feedback loop. You follow up with people once they've given you information. You've collected their feedback. Now what, right? It's that follow up. You give updates on where the feedback is going, what you're doing with it. You close that loop. The thing is, if you create this black hole of feedback, your community is going to get frustrated and they will stop trusting you. And that loss of trust is incredibly hard to earn back. If any of that happens, they're going to stop giving you feedback and you lose that wonderful source of hearing in real time how people are using your software, your product, and they're just not going to want to bother. And that apathy is the worst place to be. So you want to continually work with people and reassure them that you're hearing them. And you know what? If you're not going to use that feedback they gave you, it's okay to let them know that too. Let them know that, thank you, but we're not going to be able to use that at this time. That's okay too. But just keep the loop going, close it when needed, and then gather more feedback and so on and so forth. Just keep it all going. I'm going to give you some examples that I have seen, and there are way more, but just a few that I've seen in the past and some actually recently from some colleagues. So I don't know if you had ever seen or heard of Dell Idea Storm, but it was a great feedback site. It was working really well, and it was an incredible spot for people giving ideas. So Dell would let people submit ideas on their products. They had a team running it, and it was humming along and doing great. And Their customers loved it. People would submit all of these great ideas. They would get into the product, and then people would submit more, get into the product, and so on. Just a wonderful feedback loop. But for whatever reason, Dell as a company deprioritized it, and they took some of the team off of it, but they didn't take the site down right away, and so people kept putting in ideas and nothing happened with them. And eventually they did shut the site down, and their customers had gotten so used to having that venue to give feedback that they were really upset about it, and it gave a ding to Dell's reputation. Really took a hit because their customers had really liked Idea Storm and had really enjoyed being able to give that direct feedback and feeling heard. So I realize that things can change and priorities can change in a company. So if you are going to do a program like this, and I really think that they're worth it, but you can't just abandon something. You have to have a way to phase it out properly and not just stop it and let your customers feel the fallout and take such a big hit to um, your customer satisfaction because you just shut something down without warning. One of my friends in the industry has been recently talking about a company that when they had started an idea program, the company was really committed to it and started out really great. And then for whatever reason, the product team kind of backed off and wasn't as committed to it, but they did not shut down the submission site. So what is happening there is lacking commitment. They're not closing that feedback loop. People are still submitting things, but nothing's happening to them. So they are seeing a hit in customers being dissatisfied and asking what's happening and not getting any answers. And yet they're not shutting down the idea submission program. And so everyone's getting frustrated, and the leadership is saying, well, we're going to figure out what to do. But they're doing this every quarter. They keep saying they're going to do something, but they don't. So there's this tension between the community person who wants to do something about it and the lack of commitment from leadership in actually doing something about it. So what needs to happen is they either need to shut it down temporarily, figure out what they're doing internally, and then relaunch or just shut it down completely instead of leaving it hanging without any real information back out to the customers who are asking what's going on here. So kind of similar to Dell, when you leave people hanging, they get frustrated because they don't know what's going on, right? Um, very, very annoying thing happening to where people wonder, why am I even bothering if you're not going to do anything about it? On the other hand, I have a another colleague who has been very careful about how much they open up people submitting feature requests and ideas. Um, and people go ahead and talk about it on the community. And very recently, her colleagues were getting ready to do a hackathon. And so engineering asked them, what are the top things you're seeing in the community about features and things that they want to see? And so this person had already kind of had most of that together. So they gathered all of those feature requests and handed it to the team. And they used those in a recent hackathon. And it went really, really well because everyone was working together and paying attention to what the community was saying. And so they did the hackathon and they came up with um, well over a half a dozen or almost a dozen features that could be launched in the product in a short amount of time. And it was very successful, and they were getting ready to go back and close that loop with the community saying, hey, these things came from you all and they're ready to go into the product soon. And what was great was they hadn't made any huge promises, and yet the company was committed to finding these things and getting them in the product anyway. Um, and so it was the reverse of making promises they couldn't keep. Like they were watching the community, they saw people making requests, and they decided this is a great way to deliver value back to our community. Um, but they did it slowly. They didn't overcommit, and yet they're closing the loop back with the community anyway by taking those unsolicited requests and doing it. And then what they're planning on doing in the future is going ahead and making a making a plan to solicit those things slowly and carefully instead of overcommitting to something that they don't have the resources for yet. So when you take all of those things, building community, adding transparency, and closing the feedback loop, you work to have a greater chance at a successful innovation program. It's going to require commitment to your customers and end users, but you'll ultimately have a better process in place and a more open and beneficial relationship with them. And I know at my company, we're working on that right now where um, we have a feature request system, but we're working on doing some more of it more in the open so that people can collaborate with each other and refine what they're asking for, so that they can see each other's requests and things like that. We get that request a lot. So we're trying to work on refining our process in collaboration with our customers and what they ask for. So it can be a really neat process when you hear what your customers are asking for and you try to work with them to make that happen. And I am going to look for questions really quickly. I see something in the Q&A that says it is important to have a system where there is always constant feedback from customers. How can we do that? Well, that's a really great question. Um, it is important to have a system where there's always constant feedback, and there are a lot of ways to do that depending on your company and how you are gathering feedback. So one of the ways our company is doing that is we have a feedback uh, a request system built into our product so that people can just request right within the product. But there are many other ways. For instance, I have a weekly live stream show with my team. And what we do is we talk about new features as they're coming out. And we've done it consistently week over week for over 100 episodes now. And we have product managers that come in and also some of the product team as well as some of the engineering team comes in as well, and they will talk about what is coming out in the product, and they will do demos. And the people that attend the show are coming almost every week, and they listen, they ask a lot of really great questions. They will add their feedback about what's important to them, about what they would like to see. They'll ask clarifying questions about how it's going to work. And so we're getting that direct feedback from them as we're talking about this feature that is releasing or has already released. So that gives us information about what we need to build in for future enhancements. We have our community where we also put in release notes of things that have just released or are coming up. And that's another place where people can ask questions. We have our product managers are out and about in different community spaces answering questions a lot. So as people talk or ask questions, they're looking at things. My team also monitors stuff like that to bring feedback to the the product team, and then they pass it on to the developers to also give them that feedback. So it is a variety of spaces that we've built relationships with people so that that feedback comes from a variety of places. Of course, we also have our UX team that does interviews and user feedback sessions so that they can get the feedback that way. Our marketing team also does different sessions to get feedback on our marketing, and our PMM team is involved in that. So we're trying to get feedback from a variety of sources about several different pieces of the development cycle so that we can incorporate that in a variety of pieces of our business. And then let's see, great points regarding a trusted community. Any additional tips on keeping a community valued in the eyes of executive sponsorship? How important is it to have regular connections to those that control the purse strings, especially when they see this as nice to have but not critical? Really great question as well. Um, a lot of the times you are going to need to connect community to what's important to the executive sponsorship. So it comes down to what their goals are at the moment. It might be customer satisfaction, it might be revenue. And so as the tide changes with the higher ups, you have to reconnect your goals back to those. So it might be feature adoption if you're working closely with the product team. And so you want to look at ways that you're getting that feedback into the product team so that you can get more adoption from your users. Or it might be around getting them to, adopt new things or customer retention, or it might be strictly around new revenue and looking at ways that you can connect um, prospects and expansion into new areas of businesses and things like that. So you really have to work closely with your executive sponsors and others to always connect back to the ROI of the business. Otherwise, um, whatever you're doing is not going to be as important to the business as other projects that are being worked on. And it looks like those were the questions, and we've got about 15 seconds left. So I will wrap up and say thank you all very much for your questions and for being here. I really appreciate you attending this session. And thanks for your time, and we'll see you later.